Well, China did manipulate very heavily from 2003 to 2013. They have not done so for over 5 years. In fact, they've been intervening on the other side of the market. They've been keeping their currency from weakening. So it's simply fallacious to call them a manipulator. I'm sure President Trump ordered the Secretary of the Treasury to do so, but it simply doesn't hold up. The risk is that the president will use this designation as an excuse to increase his tariffs against China further. He could expand the coverage of imports covered. He could increase the tariffs on the products he's already got covered or is about to cover on September 1. The risk is that he uses this as a justification to ratchet up the trade war further and even morph it into a currency war.
But Fred, to that point, he could use this, or frankly, pretty much anything, as an excuse to increase the tariffs. But does it change the toolbox that he's got in front of him? Is it still just tariffs that's the main tool?
I don't think it changes the toolbox at all. The only thing the announcement said about the currency designation was that they would engage with the IMF. Well, they won't get any support in the IMF for engaging with China unless they can produce some evidence that China is manipulating. They're going to get a very cold shoulder at the IMF. They couldn't even get the IMF to help them 10 years ago when China really was manipulating. I don't think there's any prospect for that now. So there's really no additional tool that comes out of this.
What about the rest of the world, Fred? I mean, if you think about Germany, that weaker yuan, whether it's being manipulated or not, is not helpful. And the China trade practices that President Trump has been going after is not helpful for the export-led economy. So I wonder if President Trump is going to get support from some of our allies on this.
The administration has been making lukewarm efforts to line up multilateral support for the confrontation with China. But one of the great shortcomings of their trade policy has been the failure to really put together a multilateral coalition to go at it together. There's a widespread agreement around the world with the objectives of the president's efforts with the Chinese. And there's a lot of agreement with it here domestically across party lines. The disagreement is over the methods and the tactics. The fact that the president is trying to bludgeon China into agreement rather than trying to work with them and negotiate changes is really doomed to failure. Part of that is because he's declared war on his own allies through the steel tariffs, the aluminum tariffs, threatening auto tariffs, attacking NATO. He has failed to align his allies, line up a multilateral coalition. The Chinese never want to be isolated internationally. They would be much more responsive to a multilateral effort. Instead, the president has isolated the United States rather than isolating China.
Fred, how significant is it? As you said at the top, they've been propping up their currency since roughly 2012, 2013. How significant is it that they let it go past 7 when so clearly in 2016 and 2018 they didn't want to do that?
I don't think it's very significant. The currency has only dropped 2 or 3% over this period. It went through a line that people had psychologically given importance to, but it's only a very modest decline. I'm sure the market pressures are pushing the currency to go down further, and I suspect the Chinese are still intervening to keep it from weakening. I suspect the Chinese are still intervening on our behalf to keep the currency from weakening further. That's my strong guess from what's happening in the market, because the market pressures, given Trump's tariffs, given the slowdown in the Chinese economy, given the likelihood they'll reduce their interest rates to counter their downturn, all that is producing the market pressures which are weakening the RMB. It's not manipulation. Probably intervention is still on the other side of the market.
I mean, it could also, Fred, be political, right? The president campaigned on this promise. There's bipartisan support to label China currency manipulator. China bashing works. It just does. And he can go out to his rallies and say, I did what President Obama did not do. I labeled them a currency manipulator.
Oh, I'm sure those are his motives. Yeah. Within the administration, the Treasury and others in the White House had held him at bay for 2.5 years on exactly those considerations. Now he's apparently reached his frustration level. He's ordered the others, the Secretary of the Treasury, to do something he knew was not right. And so it is pure politics, but it doesn't really per se change the situation on the ground much, unless, as I say, it's used as justification to do something even more extreme on the trade front.